Sarah, are you sure you'll come today? Linda's voice on the phone was soft, almost pleading. We haven't had a family get-together in so long. We want to have dinner. Like old times. Sarah leaned back at her desk in her office in downtown Denver. The evening city hummed outside, and her tech company's to-do list flashed on her laptop screen. She rubbed her forehead tiredly. After a week of negotiating with new clients, and the idea of a family dinner seemed both tempting and tedious. Mom, I'll try, she replied, trying to hide her irritation. I have a couple more meetings, but I'll be there by 7. Oh, how wonderful, Mom perked up. Jake and Amy will be coming too. And Dad had already pulled out his signature wine. Sarah, you know how important it is for us to have you here? I know. Sarah sighed, feeling the familiar twinge of guilt. She hung up the phone and stared at the screen. Her company, which developed software for business automation, was growing faster than she expected. But with growth came risks. It was because of them that she agreed to register the house in the suburbs in her parents' name 2 years ago. Linda and Robert convinced her that this would protect her property from potential company debts. You're the CEO, Sarah, they said. If something goes wrong, the creditors could take everything. But this way, the house will be safe. Sarah, trusting them, and the family lawyer, handed over the funds for the purchase. The purchase agreement and mortgage were registered in her parents' names. She didn't see a problem with that. The house was still hers, even if it was theirs on paper. Sarah planned to move there soon. She'd already discussed switching to remote work with her team so she could spend more time outside the city. In the quiet, tree-covered countryside with fresh mountain air, the house was her dream, spacious, with large windows and a deck where she imagined herself with her laptop, working on new projects. But every time she talked about moving, her parents brushed her off. Hey, Sarah, don't rush. It still needs some renovations. She didn't insist, thinking they just wanted to help. Now, as she was getting ready for dinner, she felt a slight unease. Something in her mother's tone was off. Too much enthusiasm. Too few details. But Sarah dismissed the thought. I'm just tired, she decided, closing her laptop and packing her bag. Her parents' apartment, in an older building on the outskirts of Denver, greeted her with the familiar smell of roasted chicken and the light aroma of wine. Sarah took off her coat, hung it in the closet, and walked into the living room. The table was set salads, casseroles, a bottle of red wine. Mom was bustling about in the kitchen. Dad was opening a bottle, and Jake and Amy were sitting on the sofa, laughing about something on their phones. Zing Zara. They all turned around. Sarah. Finally, Mom clasped her hands. Come in. I sit down. We've been waiting for you? Hello. Sarah smiled, but her gaze lingered on Jake. Her brother looked overly pleased. And his fiancée, Amy, usually reserved, beamed as if she'd won the lottery. What's the occasion? You look like you're celebrating New Year's. Oh, Sarah, we'll tell you everything now. Mom pushed her toward the table. Sit down. Sit down. Sarah sat down, feeling the tension building inside her. Dad poured wine into the glasses. And Jake, putting his phone down, clapped his hands. Come on, let's not drag this out, he said, looking at his parents. Tell her. Mom smiled, but her eyes avoided Sarah's. Dad cleared his throat, as if preparing to speak. Sarah, Mom and I decided to give Jake and Amy a wedding present. He began, clapping Jake on the shoulder. They'll live in the house in the suburbs. And when the mortgage is paid off, We'll transfer the property to them. It'll be their family home. Sarah froze. Her fingers gripped the stem of her glass, as if someone had punched her in the gut. She turned slowly to her mother. "What are you doing?" Her voice was quiet, but there was a ring of steel in it. "This is my house. I paid for it." Mom fidgeted. Her hands began to shake. "Sarah, come on," she said, trying to sound kind. "The house is, of course, registered in our name, and we decided that Jake needed it more. They are young, starting a family, and you're so independent. With your business, you'll always find a place to live. Independent." Sarah felt the blood rush to her cheeks. "I worked for years to buy this house. I planned to move there, to work remotely. You knew, and now you're just giving it to Jake." Jake rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair. "Sarah, I don't start," he said dismissively. "You've always been fixated on your money. Amy and I can't afford a house like this. And you've already achieved everything. Share at least once." Amy, sitting next to him, smiled softly, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Sarah, you understand?" she added. "We have to start somewhere. And you're strong. You can handle it." Sarah looked at her parents, expecting them to say at least a word in her defense. But Dad looked away, and Mom began rearranging the salad on her plate. The silence in the room became heavy, like concrete. "So that's it." Sarah stood up slowly. Her voice trembled with suppressed rage. "I put everything I had into this house. And you decided that I don't need it, because I can manage." "Excellent. I can manage without you." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Mom jumped up. "Sarah, where are you going? Let's talk," she shouted. But Sarah didn't turn around. "We should have talked earlier." She threw over her shoulder and slammed the door. In the hallway, she stopped, her back pressed against the cold wall. Her heart was pounding, and a lump formed in her throat. She didn't cry. The tears would come later. Now there was only clarity. She had been betrayed. The parents she trusted, the brother she always supported, and even Amy, who knew how much effort Sarah had put into this house. They all decided her work was worthless. Sarah went down to her car. I started the engine and drove to her rented apartment in downtown Denver. She'd been renting it for 2 years because the company office was a 5-minute walk away. But the house in the suburbs had been her goal, a place where she envisioned her future, where she could work remotely, enjoying the peace and freedom. Now that future was gone, her parents ruined her plans by handing over the house to Jake, as if she'd never existed. In the apartment, Sarah threw her purse on the couch and opened her laptop. Her fingers trembled, but she forced herself to focus. She requested a property record from the county assessor's office to confirm her worst fears. An hour later, she received a reply. The house is registered to Linda and Robert, with a mortgage as collateral. There's no sign of a transfer to Jake. It was just their promise. But that didn't provide any reassurance. Sarah knew she was legally powerless. She'd transferred the purchase money, but the deed was in her parents' name. They could do whatever they wanted with the house. She closed her laptop and stared out the window. The city was ablaze with lights. But inside her, there was emptiness. She remembered working nights to save up for a house, giving up vacations, taking on extra projects to help her company grow. She even helped Jake when he lost his job, paying his bills. And now he called her greedy. And her parents, who always said they were proud of her, simply cut her out of their lives. For the next 6 months, Sarah lived on autopilot. She continued to rent an apartment near the office. But now her life revolved around the company. She signed a contract with a major client in Silicon Valley, hired 2 new developers, and began preparing to launch a new product. Working remotely became her goal not only for comfort but also to prove to herself that she wasn't dependent on the house that had been stolen from her. Her family was out of touch. No calls. No messages. Mom didn't send her usual recipes. Dad didn't call with questions about the computer. And Jake, who had previously only written when he needed money, I disappeared from her life. Sarah told herself she didn't care. But sometimes, returning to her empty apartment, and she felt a tightness of loneliness grip her chest. The only hints of trouble came from acquaintances. A colleague who met Mom at Target mentioned that she looked tired, almost ill. A cousin texted her Sarah. "What's going on with your family? Your dad seemed kind of nervous when I stopped by." Sarah brushed it off. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. One evening, she logged onto Facebook and noticed Jake had stopped posting photos. He used to brag about life in the house. Pictures of barbecues on the deck. Or selfies with Amy by the fireplace. Now, I silence. The last post was a month ago. Sometimes things change faster than you expect. The comments underneath hinted at trouble. Hang in there. Guys, I hope everything gets better. Sarah closed the app, her heart beating faster. Something was falling apart. But she hadn't intended to call first. Everything changed when her phone rang at 600 a.m. The name Mom appeared on the screen. Sarah stared at it for a long time before answering. For 6 months, she learned to ignore their calls. But this one was too early. Too insistent. "Sarah, it's me." Mom's voice was trembling. "We need to talk. Please. Come to the house. It's important." "What happened?" Sarah tried to speak evenly. But inside, she was cringing. "Just come." "Sarah, we're in trouble." Sarah hung up and stared at the ceiling. She could have ignored them, as they ignored her. But curiosity, or perhaps the remnants of familial affection, won out. She got ready and drove to the suburbs. The house looked different from what she remembered. The lawn was overgrown. The bushes by the fence were withered. Sarah knocked, and Mom opened the door. She looked haggard, without makeup, with disheveled hair and an old sweater. "Sarah, thank goodness." She tried to hug her daughter, but Sarah retreated. "What's going on?" she asked. Looking around, Mom sighed, inviting her in. It was cold inside, as if the heating wasn't working. Dad sat at the table, adjusting his glasses, while Jake and Amy stood by the window, avoiding her gaze. "We're behind on our mortgage," Dad began, not looking at Sarah. 5 months. The bank wants to foreclose on the house. Sarah crossed her arms, trying to hide her trembling. 5 months. She repeated, "Jake, you promised to pay." "What happened?" Jake clenched his teeth, his face flushed. "It's not just my fault," he muttered. "There were problems. I tried." Sarah turned to her parents. "And you? Did you know he wasn't paying?" Mom lowered her eyes. "We thought he could handle it," she muttered. Jake said everything was under control. Sarah laughed briefly, joylessly. "Under control. You gave him my house, and he blew it. And now you're calling me to fix everything." "Sarah, it's not like that." Mom looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. "This is our home. Our family home. We didn't mean to hurt you. But we need your help now. You can do it. You're single. You have money." Sarah looked at Jake. He looked away. But there was something familiar in his posture, a mixture of shame and defiance. She knew he'd been gambling for years. His parents had always covered his debts. But now it seemed he'd gone too far. "How much do you owe?" she asked. Her voice was cold. The businesslike. 16,000. Dad answered quietly. "If we don't pay, the bank will foreclose in a month." Sarah nodded. Her mind was racing. She could walk away. Leave them to deal with the consequences. But the house was her dream. Of her work. Perhaps this was a chance to get back what was stolen from her. "I'll think about it," she said, turning and leaving without saying goodbye. The next day, Sarah met with the lawyer she'd hired to review the documents. She requested mortgage details from Wells Fargo and obtained a property record. The house was still owned by her parents. Jake had no legal rights to it. Only a verbal promise. This gave her leverage. She called the bank and learned that the $16,000 debt could be repaid, removing the mortgage. But she wasn't simply going to save her family. If she paid, the house would become legally and unconditionally hers. Sarah scheduled a meeting with her parents. They were sitting in the same living room, but the atmosphere was different, now tense. Almost hostile. Jake and Amy were there too, but they remained silent, letting their parents speak. "I'll pay the debt," Sarah began, looking at Mom, "but with one condition. You'll transfer the house to me, and we'll do it with a lawyer so everything is clean." Dad frowned. "Sarah, this is too much," he said. "We're family. You can't do this to us." "Family?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Family is when you give my house to Jake without even asking me. When you ignore me for 6 months and then call because you need money." "No. Dad, this is business. And these are my terms." Mom began to cry. But Sarah didn't flinch. She knew they would agree. They had no choice. The bank was one step away from foreclosing on the house. And they didn't have a penny. "Okay," Dad finally said. His voice was hoarse. "We'll sign." Jake jumped up, his face contorted with anger. "This is my house," he shouted. "You can't take it." "Yours," Sarah looked at him. Her voice was icy. "You haven't paid me $1. You lived in my house, which I bought, and you brought it to foreclosure. Sight down." "Jake, you're nobody here." Amy tugged at his hand, forcing him to sit. Mom covered her face with her hands. Sarah stood up. "I'll contact a lawyer. Get the paperwork ready." The deal took 2 weeks. Sarah paid off the bank debt, removing the mortgage. Her parents signed the quitclaim deed, and the transaction was registered with the county. The lawyer reviewed all the documents, ensuring the transaction could not be contested. Sarah received a deed. The house was now hers. Sarah sent a certified letter demanding they vacate the house within 30 days, as required by law, but she also wanted to say so in person. Jake met her at the door. His eyes blazed with anger. "Are you really doing this?" he asked. "Kicking us out?" "Yes." Sarah answered calmly. "This is my house. You don't pay rent. You have no rights to it. You have 30 days to move out." Amy, standing behind Jake, tried to speak. "Sarah, we have nowhere to go." Her voice trembled. "Please, give us time." "Time?" Sarah crossed her arms. "You lived in my house for 6 months while I paid for your mistake. Now you're moving in with your parents. They wanted to help you so much. Let them help." Jake said nothing. Sarah turned and left, feeling a strange relief. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply getting what was hers. For a month, her family tried to convince her otherwise. Mom called, crying and begging her not to break up the family. Dad wrote long texts about how she was going too far. Jake sent threats, threatening to sue. But Sarah knew he had no grounds. Amy sent voicemails, sobbing, But Sarah didn't respond. She'd done enough. On the day of the eviction, Sarah arrived at the house. A U-Haul truck piled high with boxes was parked in the driveway. Jake and Amy loaded the things, and Mom and Dad helped. Avoiding her gaze, Sarah got out of her car. Her voice was light, almost mocking. "Is everything packed?" she asked. Jake turned around. His face was red with anger. "Are you satisfied?" he blurted out. "You destroyed everything." "No." "Jake," Sarah replied, looking him in the eye. "You destroyed it. I simply got mine back." Mom stepped toward her. Her eyes were full of tears. "Sarah, please," she whispered. "We're family." Sarah looked at her. Her heart ached. But she suppressed the feeling. "You made your choice," she said. "Now live with it." She turned, entered the house, and closed the door. It was quiet inside. Only the floorboards creaked under her footsteps. She walked into the living room, where she once imagined herself working, and smiled. This was her home, her victory. A month later, Sarah began renovations. She replaced the old windows, painted the walls, and ordered new furniture from Wayfair. Her company had successfully transitioned to a remote workforce, and she now worked from home, sitting on the deck with her laptop. Just as she had dreamed, business was thriving. The new product won an award at a tech conference, and clients from Europe became interested in her developments. The family didn't call again. Sarah learned from friends that Jake and Amy were living with their parents in their cramped apartment, and that Mom and Dad had sold their car to pay off debts. She felt neither joy nor pity, only peace. She had built her life without them. Sometimes, looking at the sunset over the Rocky Mountains, Sarah wondered if it was worth the fight. But every time she touched the keys to the house, she knew the answer. This was her home, her work, her future, and no one could take it away from her. Story 2. The mahogany paneling that surrounds me in William Peterson's office has a subtle lemon polish scent. Here, amid the silver-framed family photographs and framed diplomas, the presence of the father lingers. Peterson remains behind his enormous desk on the credenza. We buried Richard Clark a week ago under a marble monument that mentioned his achievements but said nothing about the man. Victoria chronicled her sorrow for her followers. Eleanor accepted condolences with trained elegance. And there was a week of numbness and casseroles from neighbors. Peterson clears his throat and shuffles papers. Dr. Clark has a sizable estate. As you are aware, when personal belongings and real estate assets are excluded, the overall worth is close to $9. $5 million. The light catches my mother's pearl earrings as she straightens in her chair. Her anguish is well adorned, and she is wearing a Chanel black dress. Eleanor, as agreed, you will inherit the main house and the financial portfolio created in 1992. Peterson goes on, his voice still neutral as he delivers both wealth and destruction over this desk. Victoria, if you inherit the lakefront vacation home and the trust fund that was created on your 21st birthday, in a gesture of support for Peterson, Victoria squeezes my hand, her French manicures pressing a little into my flesh. Later on, her Instagram would post a sweet sister moment in elegant black and white. Filtered. Peterson looks up from the papers and murmurs, Isabella. His eyes flickering. Perhaps hesitantly, you have inherited the majority of your father's financial assets, as well as the controlling stake in Clark Medical Technologies. The room slants slightly as my breath hitches. There is a condition. However, Peterson adds, naturally, even in the end, their island father never gave anything freely. The bequest is conditioned on DNA testing to establish paternity. Words hit you like slaps. I feel my hands shaking on the leather armrests. A rush of embarrassment sweeps over me, leaving my lips parched. There must have been a miscommunication. With worry that escapes her eyes, Eleanor speaks in a honey-sweet tone. Victoria mockingly puts her hand back on my. Bella. Poor you, she mutters. It's true that Daddy always had a peculiar sense of humor. Peterson takes off his spectacles and uses a monogrammed handkerchief to carefully wipe them. The guidelines are rather detailed. Miss Clark has to provide DNA confirmation from a recognized lab. Cross-referencing the findings with family markers that are already on file is necessary. On file already, my voice sounds weird and aloof. Before he died, your father gave his own example. He was comprehensive. On my 11th birthday, the memory suddenly came back to me. Father grinned proudly as Victoria played the grand piano, her fingers moving over the keys. He hardly looked at my straight-A report card when I later presented it to him. Isabella. Books are simple. Something unique is needed for true success. Since then, I had made a greater effort. Have you been awarded a scholarship to study summa cum laude graduate? There was never anything unique enough. He was as meticulous in his planning of this humiliation as he was in the operation room. I can't get the question out of my head. Why was a lifetime of subtly being rejected insufficient? Was this his last public denial I want to turn away? Reject the test. And deny him this post-mortem authority, because I am a wounded kid who is still looking for approval. But I must know because I am an archivist. A woman who works to preserve historical facts. Evidence is truthful. Individuals do, I say, more steadily than I feel. I'd like to talk to Mr. Peterson in private. Victoria's giggle had the sparkle of pricey crystal. Bella. Daddy was constantly cracking jokes. We will resolve this as a family. Her use of the word family, a term for which I have never been quite qualified, seems false. Without the test, the inheritance reverts to a secondary distribution plan. Peterson says in a softer tone, the remaining would be split between Victoria and Mrs. Stray. Clark, with small bequests to other medical organizations. After years of Sunday breakfasts and charity events, Eleanor and Victoria have mastered the art of quiet communication via their eyes. I was either too unwanted or too busy to go. They are already spending the money in their minds, organizing trips to destinations where Victoria's fans may appreciate her well-curated sorrow set against beautiful scenery. Peterson goes on to say that the law is quite clear you lose the inheritance if it isn't verified. The stakes become clear to me. Money isn't the only factor here. This is my father's last opportunity to openly reject me and validate his lifelong insinuation that I didn't belong. I lose everything if I don't take the exam, including the opportunity to comprehend why he would plan this last act of cruelty. How much time would it take to test, I inquire, trying to control my emotions. By concentrating on the specifics, results should arrive in 2 weeks. Maybe sooner given my request for expedited status. From her sleeve, Eleanor removes invisible lint. Surely there must be some way to speed things up. William the family should put on a unified face at the charity event next month. Victoria nods. And I've set the start date for the villa's repair at 3 weeks from now. A sizable deposit is required by the contractor. The door opens, and Margaret Wilson emerges in the entryway. Her practical haircut and sensible jacket, a sharp contrast to the polished beauty of my mother and sister. My university archives colleague looks at the scene in front of her and raises an eyebrow. She addresses me directly, saying, I've been waiting outside for an hour. You seem to be in need of air and coffee. The decision is made. Stay with the one individual who has no interest in the Clark family drama. Or leave this circle of phony worry and strategic moves. Foundation, galas, and holiday homes are irrelevant to Margaret. She shares my concern for the truth. I get up and use my fairly steady hands to straighten my skirt. I'll give you a call tomorrow to set up the exam. Mr. Peterson. Margaret acts as a personal barrier between my family and myself, protecting me from their well-honed manipulations. It takes time for Ms. Clark to absorb. I'll take her home by car. Eleanor puts a restraint hand on Victoria's arm as she opens her lips to object. Over lunch at the club where Eleanor has been a member for 30 years. They will reorganize and plan. I follow Margaret to the door, and Peterson yells after me. For the record, Isabella, your father was complex. Even after decades of knowing him, I've never really comprehended his intentions. With one hand on the doorframe, hesitate. I tell him, quietly but firmly, that I want to know the truth, no matter the cost. My phone pings 3 days after the embarrassing incident in Peterson's office, while I'm organizing specimens in the university archive's climate-controlled storage room. Margaret looks through a pile of letters from the Civil War. Is everything all right? This is Victoria. I say, looking at the reply. They are now en route to my apartment. Margaret's eyebrows go up. Do you want me to stay late? We may complete the Palmer Collections catalog. We don't have to suffer together. The phone is tucked inside my pocket. Plus, I'll have to deal with them someday. Eleanor's silver Mercedes is already parked in the guest place when I get home. I discover them in my living room, Victoria roaming the perimeter, looking at my framed botanical pictures with fake curiosity, and Eleanor sitting on the edge of my couch, as if it may ruin her Chanel suit. With a calculatingly sweet smile, Victoria continues. We let ourselves in. Mother was recognized from the hospital charity auction last spring by Mrs. Crazen at Murray's, Abernathy, who lived next door. She did. Of course, for 30 years, Eleanor has developed a social network around Boston, every one of whom may be an accomplice or spy. I don't offer to remove their coat. I just hang mine. Why have you come here? Eleanor smooths her skirt's unseen creases. We have been concerned about you. Darling, this terrible state of affairs with the will. Victoria interrupts, slipping into my reading chair as if she were posing for her Instagram fans. We've spoken with another attorney. This harsh requirement may be circumvented. I'm still standing. The terms seem to be quite obvious to Father's lawyer. The sparkle of Eleanor's giggle is like a drop of frost on a tree. When it comes to the law, William has always been strict. Richard was similar in that he insisted on evidence, paperwork, and verification all the time. What are you saying? Seeing something important in her tone, I inquire, tracing the pearls around her neck with her fingertips. She lets out a sigh. Your dad had. We've had trust concerns in our marriage. He wanted evidence of promises and questioned allegiances. He is paranoid. And this DNA bullshit is simply another example. Victoria gives a well-practiced, sympathetic nod. Bella. It wasn't personal. This is what Daddy did to everyone. All of them. I'll say it again. Comparable verification terms were included in his commercial contracts. The medical foundation records. 2. Eleanor explains. He demanded that there be consequences for board members who failed to show up for meetings. My archivist's mind starts gathering information and organizing it chronologically. How long did he act in this manner? Eleanor turns to look out the window. Actually, from the start, he sent private detectives to track me down. Twice. Eleanor turns to look out the window. When? The question comes out harsher than I thought it would. Once before, to our marriage. And once after the birth of Victoria. Victoria fidgets with her watch, a Cartier adorned with diamonds that gleams brightly in the afternoon. Mother always took everything in stride. In contrast to the spouses of some of his medical colleagues, who would have created a stir, my imagination conjures up an image of famous physician Richard Clark meticulously recording perceived slights and alleged betrayals throughout the course of his life. With everyone. Not just with myself. My thinking is fundamentally altered by the revelation. He was suspicious of everyone in his circle, and his hostility toward me was not uncommon. The Christmas I was 12 years old. Slowly, I say, my father handed me a Greek mythology book instead of the engraved timepieces he gave to everyone else. Did this pattern include that and... Eleanor dismissively waves her hand. Richard had strange views about what kind of presents were suitable. The hospital board was the recipient of the watches. You're making too many assumptions about the past. However, the inscription he wrote inside that book comes to mind. Study the past to comprehend the present. I saw it as support for my developing interest in history at the time. I wonder now whether that was a hint. I test the hypothesis that is developing in my thoughts by saying, Dad's kindness from time to time. Was it a performance, or was it real? Victoria gives an eye roll. Really? Bella. Do you have to do a thorough analysis of everything? Our goal is to protect you from embarrassment in public. Her word choice attracts my attention. The general public in Boston. Word gets around. Eleanor explains, people will speak if this test is carried out. There will be inquiries about our family that are best left unanswered. Fragments of memory fit together with conversations I'd never completely understood between my parents regarding evidence and loyalty. Despite my better marks, Father insisted on looking over Victoria's school records while hardly looking at mine. He kept thorough records that documented everything from weather trends to family gatherings and hospital board meetings. This test isn't about making me look bad. I continue softly, my confidence growing with each sentence. It's about revealing something completely different. Victoria suddenly gets up and walks up to the window. Isabella. Everyone is inconvenienced by this delay. I have obligations. It will cost a lot of money to begin my influencer brand next month. My portion of the inheritance has already been distributed. Beneath her polished exterior, there is real terror. Maintaining appearances is essential to Victoria's well-planned existence. And looks cost money. Mother, isn't it also time for you to renew your membership at the country club? I inquire. Recalling the yearly drama that went along with that specific check, Eleanor tenses up. I have responsibilities because of my social status. Our family has been a member of the Duxbury Club for many generations. Categorized. They are really afraid about losing the identity and way of life they have established. They are not cartoon villains with mustaches. Delays in inheritance entail an instant problem for them. Victoria's tone softens as she proposes that maybe we may make an agreement. We can resolve any issues when the inheritance is resolved. Misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. I say it again. For a brief time, Victoria's mask comes off. Mother often said that, particularly after your birth, Daddy was suspicious of family devotion. Eleanor gives Victoria a foreboding look that says it all. Please. Victoria. Margaret texts me. And my phone buzzes. I discovered an intriguing item in the hospital's records. Give me a call. With renewed clarity, I say, I need you both to go. I have a scheduled appointment. Eleanor notices the steel in my voice and rises up as Victoria starts to object. We'll talk about this more later. Isabella. Keep in mind that family concerns should be kept confidential. I phone Margaret after they depart, and she picks up right away. I specialize in family history. Let me assist you. I tell her that I must have access to the medical school archives. In particular, information pertaining to visiting surgeons from the early 1900s. I need access to the archives of the medical school. Ahead of you already. She adds, in half an hour, meet me in the archive room. I contact Peterson's office after hanging up. I am put through right away by his secretary. He calls her Miss Clark. I was going to give you a call. How may I be of assistance? I agree that my father gave clear instructions, but I need to know where your allegiance rests in carrying out his intentions. He pauses for a moment. But it matters. Miss Clark, I swear to do all it takes to carry out his intentions in a fair manner. Good. I say, since I have to take a methodical approach to this. Family myths are not what we need. We need original sources. As I grab my keys and coat, and my mind is already planning the next steps in the inquiry. Whatever my father intended me to unearth, whatever truth he couldn't or wouldn't share while he was alive, will be revealed by my archiving talents, Margaret's research skills, and Peterson's legal advice. I realize I'm no longer worried about the results of the DNA test as I shut my door. I'm scared of what I'll do with the truth once I know it for the first time. After half an hour, my fingertips follow the polished wood shelves as I go through the university's special collections department. Yesterday, the 27 boxes of diaries, photos, and memorabilia from the Richard Clark Memorial Medical Collection, which chronicles my father's illustrious medical career, arrived. Regardless of the results of the DNA test, Peterson called for a gift to be made, as specified in the bequest. Months before he passed away, my father made a last-ditch effort to ensure his legacy, though it should hurt. I've moved from pain to calculating interest after 2 weeks of restless nights and meticulously cataloged suspicions. You must pay attention to box 14, Margaret replies, showing up next to me with a hot coffee mug. There are several diaries from the 900 seconds that don't correspond with the official contribution list. Whether it's for work or pleasure, I take the coffee and smell its wonderful scent. Individual. Quite intimate. I look into her eyes. When I began my first cataloging, I came across records that mentioned Laurent and your mother. My parents got into a half-remembered quarrel when I was 7 or 8 years old because of the name. Uncomfortably, my father's voice rose in our kitchen. Eleanor, Laurent's fellowship expired 15 years ago. 15 years. Following Margaret to a climate-controlled processing room, where a leather-bound diary is open, under archival illumination, crystallizes the recollection. The pages are filled with my father's exact handwriting, which, even from across the table, shows little indentations from the pressure of his fountain pen. 37 pages. Margaret replies softly as she moves aside to give me some space. I put on some cotton gloves, and then I touch the notebook. The date of the entry is September 1, 101, which is 2 months before to my birth. My father noted that Eleanor's actions after Laurent's fellowship ended are still worrisome. There is no way that the timing is coincidence. Pregnancy after 9 months of inexplicable absences, emotional detachment, and secret phone conversations. Dates are something I've calculated a lot. Unless medical science is mistaken regarding human gestation durations, the kid cannot be mine. My breath catches. Suddenly, the space seems too bright and too warm. Margaret slides a packet in my direction and adds, "There's more." I made comparisons between the newsletters of the hospital from the year 1990 and the one from the year 1991. During that time, Dr. Antoine Laurent finished a visiting fellowship at Massachusetts General. A blurry snapshot of a tall guy with black hair that is wavy stands next to my mother at a hospital fundraiser. While I look through photocopied newsletters, Eleanor is beaming as she caresses his arm in a casually intimate manner and laughs up at him. According to Margaret, there are 27 photos from hospital events at that time in the archives. In 23, your mother makes an appearance. 19 features Dr. Laurent. In 15, they are shown together. My analytical side kicks in and creates a timetable with forensic accuracy. January 1990 saw Laurent's arrival in Boston. The date of my birth is November 1, 2001. My conception coincided exactly with Laurent's fellowship. As sample math shows, power moves somewhat in my favor for the first time since the will reading. My father's paranoia was his last effort to validate a hunch he had carried for decades. Not an attempt to make me seem bad. Margaret reluctantly adds, "There's something else about Victoria." Additionally, she offers me another notebook. This one, from 917. My father's estimations surrounding Victoria's birth in November of 1987 are detailed in the entry. Laurent's first consultation took place on December 1, 186, and was followed by another one on February 1, 186. Although not conclusive, the timing seems questionable. According to Eleanor, the pregnancy came as a surprise, but was welcomed. The revelation strikes like a lightning strike. Victoria and I were thought by my father to be Laurent's offspring. Victoria needs to see this, I reply, sounding more composed than I really am. In only 1 hour, I produced a meticulous folder with photocopied diary entries, hospital newsletter images, and a schedule of Laurent's appointments in Boston. Applying research technique to family secrets and using my professional expertise to support personal disclosure, I texted Victoria at 3 p.m. and discovered crucial paperwork on the will predicament in the university archives. She responds right away. Can't you send them an email today's conference call with possible sponsors? I respond, adding the critical words that would guarantee her presence. These must be seen in person. They have a big influence on how inheritance is distributed. Victoria takes impatience and the smell of pricey perfume with her as she bursts into the archives at 3:17. In the academic setting, her fitted slacks and cream silk shirt seem ridiculously formal. She puts her high-end purse on my desk and says, I rescheduled an important call for this. This must be worthwhile. I point to the chair across from mine at Island. I have been studying my ancestry. Victoria lets out a loud sigh. Isabella. We have people for genealogy projects. I can recommend Mother's researcher who traced us back to the Mayflower for her DAR application. This isn't about distant ancestors. I slide the folder toward her. It's about our father and a French surgeon named Antoine Laurent. Her perfectly manicured hand hesitates above the folder. Something flickers in her eyes. Recognition. Perhaps even fear. Who's Antoine Laurent? She asks. But her voice lacks conviction. You tell me. I reply, opening the folder to the photograph of our mother with Laurent. Because father seemed quite concerned about his relationship with mother during the years we were both conceived, Victoria's face loses color as she scans the journal entries. Her social media poise cracks, revealing genuine shock. This is absurd, she says, but her trembling fingers betray her. Father was always paranoid about mother's hospital fundraising work. You know how jealous he could be. Was he paranoid I placed the timeline before her? Or, Perceptive Laurent was in Boston, exactly 9 months before my birth. And before that, he consulted at Mass General 9 months before yours. Victoria's gaze snaps to mine. What exactly are you suggesting I'm taking the DNA test tomorrow? I say calmly. Are you prepared for what it might show about both of us? The power dynamic between us inverts completely. For 31 years, Victoria has been the favored daughter, the undisputed Clark heiress. Now she stares at me with dawning comprehension of what these documents suggest. You're enjoying this, she whispers. No, I answer truthfully. I'm simply bringing truth to light. For once, I'm not the one being manipulated. Victoria gathers her purse with shaking hands and stands. Mother needs to know about this. I'm sure she already does. I reply. After Victoria leaves, Margaret returns with additional photographs from the archives. I found these in a separate donation from the Hospital Historical Society. Society functions your father didn't attend, but your mother and Dr. Laurent did. The photographs show Eleanor and Laurent at gallery openings, charity galas, even a weekend medical retreat. In Vermont, in each image, their body language speaks of intimacy and shared secrets. My phone rings. Peterson's name appears on the screen. Isabella, he says, without preamble, I've been speaking with your father's former colleagues about the will situation. Several mentioned remembering Dr. Laurent quitte vividly. I hold my breath. Waiting. One particular comment seemed relevant. Peterson continues. Doctor, Harrison mentioned Laurent's strong resemblance to Victoria, said he'd always thought it remarkable how she had Laurent's eyes and chin rather than your father's features. The final piece clicks into place. My father believed Victoria wasn't his biological child and had evidence beyond mere suspicion. Thank you. I say, mind racing with possibilities. That's extremely helpful. I hang up and stare at the scattered evidence before me. For the first time, I understand my father's coldness toward me wasn't personal rejection, but systematic suspicion directed at both daughters. The revelation brings neither comfort nor closure. Only strategic advantage. The question now isn't whether to expose the truth, but how. Do I confront Eleanor immediately with what I've discovered, or gather more evidence? First, I glance at Margaret, who watches me with concerned eyes. What would you do, I ask. Document everything. She answers without hesitation. Then decide from a position of complete knowledge. I nod. Archival instincts overriding emotional impulses. The truth has waited decades. It can wait a little longer until I have incontrovertible evidence. Tomorrow's DNA test will provide the final proof, then I'll decide exactly how to use it. The next day, I step into the sterile reception area of Boston Genetic Partners. The scent of antiseptic and lemon-scented cleaner replacing the faint smell of leather that permeated Peterson's office. The DNA testing facility operates with ruthless efficiency, online appointments, electronic intake forms, and a receptionist who processes me without a single unnecessary word. Isabella Clark. She confirms. Scanning my driver's license. Sample collection room 3. Down the hall on your right. The collection process takes less than 5 minutes. A cheek swab. Sealed in a bar-coded container, labeled with patient information that reduces me to a number. The technician, a young man with kind eyes above his mask, attempts small talk. First time doing genetic testing, I nod, watching him label the vial. Lots of people doing ancestry research these days. He offers, this isn't about finding distant relatives. I reply, it's about confirming the ones I already have. Back in my apartment, I spread a fresh timeline across my dining table. Dates from hospital newsletters, social registries, and medical conference proceedings create a stark pattern once arranged chronologically. I plot each point with the methodical precision I use for archive preservation projects. White cotton gloves protecting fragile newsprint as I transfer information to my growing chart. December 1000. 986. Doctor. Antoine Laurent begins surgical fellowship at Massachusetts General Hospital. January 1000. 987. Hospital charity gala photographs show Eleanor and Antoine seated at same table. Richard absent due to emergency surgery. February 1000. 987. 3 society page mentions of Eleanor. Attending events where Antoine was present. Richard appears in only one photograph. November 1000. 987. Victoria born at Massachusetts General. December 1000. 987. Antoine Laurent returns to Paris. Victoria had always claimed our father's focus on precision made him a brilliant surgeon, but a distant parent. Now, I wonder if his precision served another purpose, tracking his suspicions while maintaining the appearance of a successful marriage and family. The apartment phone rings, startling me from my concentration. Isabella. It's Margaret. Any progress with the timeline I've established when Laurent was in Boston? The dates align precisely with Victoria's conception. My voice sounds distant. Clinical and archivist reporting findings, rather than a daughter discovering family secrets. What's your next step? Margaret asks. I need medical staff directories from the hospitals during that period. Proof they work together. Not just attended the same social functions. I can help with that. The university archive has reciprocal privileges with the medical school library. Perfect. I make a note on my growing task list. Peterson's providing the legal framework if Victoria contests the results. If you mean when. Either way, I'll be prepared. After hanging up, I return to my timeline, adding photographs clipped from microfiche copies of hospital newsletters. In one, Eleanor laughs at something Antoine says, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Richard stands several feet away, focused on a conversation with the hospital administrator. I establish a simple network diagram connecting archivists at 3 Boston universities, Peterson's legal colleagues with estate experience, and 2 genealogists who owe me favors for research assistance. This isn't about confrontation. Not yet. It's about documenting every relevant fact before anyone can challenge what the DNA results will show. My doorbell rings at 7. Margaret stands there, holding a stack of folders and a bag of takeout, Thai food and hospital staff directories. She announces, "I figured you hadn't eaten." We spread the folders across my living room floor, creating an evidence map that would impress the most meticulous detective. "Look at this," Margaret says, pointing to a staff photo from 1990. Eleanor was on the hospital auxiliary board, the same year Laurent arrived. They would have worked together on fundraising events. I confirm, adding another connection to my diagram. 3 days later, an email notification appears on my phone. Sample status update from Boston Genetic Partners. I open it, expecting confirmation that processing has begun. Instead, due to inconclusive preliminary results, we request an additional sample for verification purposes. Please contact our office to schedule a second collection appointment. My stomach tightens. I call the testing facility immediately. This is highly unusual. The technician explains. Sometimes sample contamination occurs. But what I press? Well, sometimes when paternity is in question, we see unusual genetic markers that require additional testing. A surge of fear rises in my chest. Did Richard deliberately sabotage the test? Create false markers to prolong the humiliation, even after death? I close my eyes. Breath shaky. This delay gives Victoria and Eleanor time to build an alternative legal challenge, perhaps claiming emotional distress or undue influence. When I open my eyes, determination replaces fear. I schedule the second appointment for tomorrow morning, even from the grave. He's making me prove myself. I whisper to the empty room. This time, I'll be prepared for any result. I return to my evidence wall, adding a new section for contingencies. What if both Victoria and I share Antoine as our father? What if neither of us is Richard's biological child? What if the inconclusive results are themselves evidence of something Richard discovered but never revealed? The answers won't come from emotional speculation. They'll emerge from methodical investigation documents, photographs, timelines, and finally, DNA. I need facts before feelings, evidence before confrontation. I touch the photograph of Richard accepting a medical award, his expression stern even in triumph. I'll find your truth. I promise. Whatever it island. The next day, the second DNA test goes smoother than the first. No awkward conversations with lab technicians. No explanations needed about why I'm seeking verification. Just another vial of blood drawn by a woman with efficient hands who asks nothing beyond confirming my identity. I've chosen a different company this time. More expensive. More prestigious. With a reputation for accuracy that could withstand even Victoria's legal challenges. Results typically available within 10 business days. The technician tells me, pressing a cotton ball against the small puncture in my arm, I need them faster. I say, sliding a folded check across the counter. Premium processing. Back at my condo, I spread my evidence across the dining table that has become my war room. Margaret brings coffee in the ceramic mugs we purchased during a museum conference last year. The table surface disappears beneath a timeline of fellowship announcements, hospital newsletters, and society page clippings. This is quite the dossier. Margaret says, studying the chronological arrangement. You've been thorough. Archivists are nothing, if not methodical. I tap a yellowed Boston Medical Quarterly from Winter 1. 986. Look here. Antoine Laurent's fellowship began that year, and he left next year. December. The announcement mentions his specialty in cardiothoracic surgical techniques, exactly what father was known for. Margaret lifts a society page photograph showing Eleanor laughing beside a tall man with Victoria's distinctive cheekbones. The resemblance is striking. Father must have seen it too. I arrange Victoria's birth certificate beside the photo. The timeline fits perfectly. Laurent was in Boston 9 months before she was born. The doorbell interrupts our analysis. Peterson stands in the hallway, briefcase in hand. Expression grim? I've prepared the legal framework for various scenarios, he says, opening his briefcase at my kitchen table. Legal documents slide out in neat folders. Color-coded tabs marking different sections. Yellow if both of you are Richard's daughters. Green if neither island. In blue, if only one of you is biologically related. You think of everything. I say, your father taught me to prepare for all contingencies. Peterson's fingers linger on the blue folder. Isabella. You should understand the implications. If Victoria contests these results, she will. I interrupt. She's already positioning herself on social media. Poor Victoria. Traumatized by Daddy's cruel will. Then we need to be ready for a prolonged fight. Peterson adjusts his glasses. The more evidence we compile now, the stronger our position. Later, after Peterson leaves, I sort everything into 3 expandable files. Timeline, photographic evidence, legal documentation, new emotional narratives. Just facts arranged in the methodical fashion that has defined my professional life. This isn't about hurt feelings anymore. It's about uncovering a truth that has shaped our family for decades, without any of us knowing it. 4 days later, my laptop pings with a new email notification. Subject line: test results available. My finger hovers over the trackpad. Suddenly, hesitant. What if I'm not his daughter either? What if this destroys what little family I have left? The question paralyzes me. For all my preparation, all my evidence gathering, I haven't fully confronted the most frightening possibility that proving Victoria isn't Richard's daughter might simultaneously prove that I'm not either. That I've been building a case that will ultimately disinherit me too. Will, knowing the truth, heal or destroy me? Is this what Richard really wanted? My phone rings, startling me from my paralysis. Peterson's name appears on the screen. Victoria has requested an emergency meeting. He says without preamble. She claims to have new information regarding the will. What kind of information she wouldn't say, but she insisted on meeting tomorrow morning. His voice lowers. Isabella. Have you opened your results yet? I was just about to. I stare at the unopened email. Whatever they show, we need to be prepared before this meeting. After hanging up, I take a deep breath and click the email. The laboratory letterhead appears, followed by clinical language about methodology and controls. I scan past the technical details until I reach the conclusion section. Probability of paternity. 99%. 99%. Relief washes through me, momentarily weakening my knees. I am Richard Clark's biological daughter. The truth I've been seeking, the validation I'd secretly craved, appears in stark black and white on my screen. But there's a second attachment labeled Supplemental Report. I click it open, eyes widening as I read the additional information. The lab has identified something unexpected in the genetic markers they tested. I reach for my phone. Texting Margaret. I need 3 folders prepared for tomorrow's meeting. Blue ones, with clear labels. Then I download the reports. For my hands steady as I save the files, no trembling, no racing heart. Just the calm certainty of someone who finally holds all the evidence needed to reveal a long-hidden truth. Tomorrow at Peterson's office, the truth comes out, all of it. That night, I clicked through Victoria's Instagram for the third time today. Watching her calculated character assassination unfold in real time, her latest post shows her gazing pensively at our father's gravestone. Black manicure resting dramatically against the polished granite. The caption reads, "When family betrayal cuts deeper than grief, some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. Family betrayal. Truth hurts. Healing journey." The comment section overflows with sympathetic responses from her followers. Stay strong. V. Sending prayers during this difficult time. Victoria has curated her public image with precision. The grieving daughter now facing mysterious additional trauma. My phone buzzes with a text from Margaret. Boston Globe Society page just called the archive asking about you. Reporter named Harriet Winters. Hey. My stomach tightens. Victoria has escalated beyond social media. The society pages our mother has cultivated relationships with for decades now represent a more dangerous battlefield. I pull up the columnists' recent articles, charity galas, museum openings, and the occasional tasteful scandal among Boston's elite. The Clark family drama would make perfect Sunday reading. The phone rings. Eleanor. Isabella. Her voice wavers between anger and tears. Whatever you think you know, you'll destroy this family if you reveal it. I stand at my kitchen window, watching rain streak the glass. I'm not the one who contacted the Globe. Mother, Victoria is protecting herself. Can you blame her? You've been digging through Richard's things like some detective. Making accusations. I haven't accused anyone of anything. I say, measuring each word. I simply took the DNA test Father required in his will. These tests are often wrong. Eleanor's voice hardens. Victoria spoke with Dr. Greenwald at Memorial Hospital. He says DNA testing can give false results. Of course, Victoria has medical connections. She's built her influencer empire partially on sponsored content for wellness brands and medical spas. The results aren't wrong. Mother. A long silence stretches between us. When Eleanor speaks again, her voice has the brittle quality it gets when she's cornered. Victoria plans to contest the will, regardless of what your test shows. Her attorney says the process could take years. Is that what you want? For all of us to be dragged through court while strangers paw through our family history? The threat lands precisely where Victoria intended. My professional reputation depends on discretion and respect for historical records. A public legal battle would undermine everything I've built. Think about what Richard would have wanted. Eleanor continues, pressing her advantage. He valued the family name above everything. This is where she's wrong. Father valued truth above everything, even when that truth was painful. I hear his voice from a rare moment of connection during my college graduation. History isn't what people wish happened. Isabella. It's what actually occurred. Whether convenient or not, I'll see you tomorrow at Peterson's office. I say, ending the call before Eleanor can respond. Within minutes, my phone lights up with a notification. Victoria has posted again a black and white image of herself, staring soulfully into the camera. Carefully crafted tear tracks visible on her cheeks. The caption reads, "When apparent psychological abuse continues even after death, some wills are weapons. Toxic family. Healing. From narcissistic abuse. My truth journey. R. The side of my before anyone else. Jur. She's reframing the narrative, casting herself as the victim of our father's psychological manipulation, rather than facing the reality of the DNA results. Her followers respond with outrage on her behalf. No one should use a will to hurt their children. Stay strong. Beautiful soul. Margaret arrives at my door with takeout Thai food and determination written across her face. I brought reinforcements, she says, nodding toward William Peterson, walking up behind her. Briefcase in hand. Sorry to arrive unannounced. Peterson says, rain beating on his wool overcoat. Victoria's attorney contacted me about filing preliminary objections to the will execution. We spread documents across my dining table while Margaret unpacks the food. Peterson pulls out the legal filings. Victoria's attorney has prepared thick with procedural objections and demands for additional testing. They're claiming Richard wasn't of sound mind when he added the DNA provision. Peterson explains, they found 2 of his former colleagues willing to testify. He became paranoid in his final months. That's absurd. I say, he was operating until 3 weeks before his death. Peterson nods. I know. But they're creating a paper trail to delay everything. It's a standard tactic. Margaret lays out the files we've assembled. Hospital newsletters showing Eleanor and Antoine Laurent at events. Society page clippings. The DNA test results. We need to present all of this formally. No more piece-by-piece revelations. Peterson reviews our evidence with professional detachment. This is extraordinarily thorough. Isabella, you've documented everything with precision. I'm an archivist. I remind him, documentation is what I do. My phone lights up with another call from Eleanor, which I decline. Seconds later, a text appears. Victoria says she'll drop everything if you agree to split the estate 50/50. Please be reasonable. Plus, I show the message to Peterson. That's an interesting development. He says, she knows she has no legal standing. She's afraid. Margaret observes. The DNA results must have shocked her. Peterson opens his briefcase and extracts another folder. I obtained this today. The complete results from both testing companies, including the supplemental analysis. I scan the documents, pausing at a highlighted section. Subjects share maternal DNA markers only. No paternal markers in common. Victoria and I have different fathers. There's something else. Peterson says quietly. Victoria received a preliminary report 3 days ago. She's known since then. The realization hits me like a physical blow. While Victoria was posting about family betrayal and psychological abuse, she already knew the truth. She wasn't processing shock. She was conducting a preemptive public relations campaign. She's trying to control the narrative, Margaret says, echoing my thoughts. If she portrays herself as the victim of Richard's posthumous cruelty, she preserves her image even if the truth comes out. I flip through the supplemental report, absorbing the technical details that confirm what Richard apparently suspected for decades. I was his biological daughter. Victoria was not. I'll need all of this organized for tomorrow. I say, professional focus, overriding emotional reaction. Everything chronological. With the most crucial evidence highlighted. Margaret squeezes my shoulder. I'll stay and help. We'll make duplicates of everything. Peterson stands to leave. Isabella, are you certain you want to proceed with the full revelation? Victoria has made it clear she'll fight this publicly. I think of Victoria's calculated Instagram posts. The society columnist preparing to feast on our family secrets. Eleanor's frantic attempts to preserve appearances. For 31 years, I've lived in the shadow of their carefully constructed reality. I'm not coming to argue. I tell Peterson, I'm coming with evidence that can't be disputed. After Peterson leaves, Margaret and I work late into the night, organizing documents, highlighting key passages, creating a timeline that traces Eleanor's relationship with Antoine Laurent alongside Victoria's birth. Every piece fits together with the neat precision of historical fact rather than family mythology. You know what bothers me most, I say, as we finish the final presentation folder. It's not that Victoria isn't Richard's daughter. It's that they've known, or at least suspected all along. Every time they made me feel like I didn't belong. They were projecting their own secret. Margaret pauses in her labeling. Tomorrow, you reclaim your story. The real one. Not the version they've been telling. I place the final document. The DNA comparison showing Victoria and I share only our mother's genetic markers into the folder. Tomorrow. The truth, my father orchestrated from beyond the grave, will finally emerge, changing everything about the family narrative Victoria and Eleanor have controlled for decades. The rain continues its steady rhythm against the windows as I prepare for the confrontation that will either destroy my family or finally make it honest. The next morning, I arrive at Peterson's office 30 minutes early, carefully placing my leather portfolio on the passenger seat. The morning sun glints off the brass building numbers as I check my reflection in the car window. No trace of the sleepless night shows on my face. Only calm determination in the eyes that Richard always said were too observant for my own good. Margaret meets me at the entrance. Her sensible navy cardigan, a stark contrast to the designer outfits Victoria and Eleanor will undoubtedly wear. Ready? She asks, carrying a stack of authenticated hospital newsletters. As ready as I'll ever be. I smooth my charcoal skirt, feeling the weight of the evidence folders in my tote bag. Thank you for being here. Peterson's receptionist ushers us into the conference room rather than his office. A space designed for corporate negotiations rather than family matters. The long mahogany table gleams under recessed lighting, water glasses, and legal pads at each place, setting like formal dinner arrangements. Miss Clark. Peterson rises, offering his hand. I've prepared the room as requested. Victoria and Eleanor arrive together 10 minutes later, entering with the synchronized grace of performers who've rehearsed their entrance. Eleanor wears black Armani, her pearl earrings catching the light. Victoria has chosen cream linen with gold accessories. The picture of wounded innocence for her inevitable social media documentation later. Their practiced smiles falter when they notice Margaret arranging documents at the far end of the table. I wasn't aware this would be a group meeting. Eleanor says, voice honeyed with artificial concern. Peterson gestures toward the chairs. Isabella requested additional space for documentation purposes. I wait until everyone is seated before distributing the folder's thick manila envelopes with neatly labeled tabs. My hands remain steady. My archival training evident in the precise organization of each document. What's all this, Victoria asks? Not opening her folder. Evidence. I say simply, everything properly authenticated and dated. Eleanor opens her folder first, skimming the contents with practiced nonchalance until she reaches the highlighted section of the DNA report. Her fingers freeze on the page. Victoria, watching her mother's reaction, finally opens her own folder. The color drains from her face as she reads the words, maternal match only, highlighted in yellow. These tests are often inaccurate. Eleanor says, voice rising slightly. We should get second opinions. William, surely you understand the importance of verification in legal matters. I remove a second folder from my bag. I anticipated that response. This contains results from a different laboratory. Same conclusion. Peterson clears his throat. I've reviewed both reports. They appear scientifically sound and legally admissible. Victoria slams her fulla shoot. This is ridiculous. Some laboratory error doesn't erase 34 years of family history. It's not just the DNA. I say, opening my portfolio. Margaret has helped me compile a comprehensive timeline. Margaret slides the first document across the table. A hospital staff directory from 1986 to 1987. Dr. Antoine Loren served as visiting cardiovascular surgeon at Boston Memorial from December 1986 through December 1987. I point to the highlighted entries. Victoria was born in November 1987. Exactly 9 months after the hospital gala in February. Eleanor's hand trembles slightly as she reaches for her water glass. The DNA results show that Victoria and I share maternal DNA, only different fathers. I continue, my voice steady. I am Richard Clark's biological daughter. Victoria is not. Margaret places a yellowed hospital newsletter on the table. The front page shows Eleanor laughing beside a tall man with Victoria's distinctive chin dimple. Richard appears in the background. Watching them. The 17th of December. 1986. Margaret says. The caption identifies Dr. IEN, Laurent, and Mrs. Clark as co-chairs of the holiday fundraising committee. By. Victoria's carefully maintained composure finally cracks. You've been planning this humiliation all along. Just like Richard. I meet her gaze steadily. I only sought the truth. Father did too. Apparently, he found it. Eleanor's perfectly manicured hands spread flat against the table surface, as if trying to anchor herself. Richard and I were having problems. She whispers. He was never home. The medical practice consumed him. Mother. I know not conticate. Victoria gasps. Antoine was kind when Richard was cold. Eleanor continues. Words spilling out after decades of containment. It was brief, just a few months before he returned to France. Peterson adjusts his glasses. Clearly uncomfortable with this confession. The legal implications are quite clear. The will specifically required biological relation to Richard Clark to inherit the controlling interest and liquid assets. His legal assistant, who has been quietly taking notes, looks up with undisguised interest. The second assistant by the door fails to maintain a professional mask, her eyebrows rising at Eleanor's confession. Victoria's hands begin to shake, her social media persona crumbling under the weight of reality. This can't be happening. My entire life has been a lie. I didn't create this situation. I say quietly. I simply uncovered what was hidden. Eleanor reaches for Victoria's hand. Richard suspected but never confirmed. He loved you in his way. Victoria. Not enough to leave me his company. Victoria says bitterly. Not enough to treat me as his own after I failed to be the perfect daughter. The realization of Richard's lifelong emotional distance from Victoria, the subtle favoritism toward me that I never recognized, settles into the room like a physical presence. Peterson reviews the legal documents. According to the will's conditions, Isabella is confirmed as the sole heir to Clark Medical Technologies and the specified liquid assets. Victoria pushes away from the table, mascara tracking down her cheeks. So, that's it. 35 years as Richard Clark's daughter erased by a DNA test. The victory I anticipated feels hollow as I watch my sister's world collapse. Not through my actions, but through choices made before either of us was born. It doesn't have to end this way. I say, surprising myself. The will specifies what I receive, not what I do with it afterward. Peterson looks up sharply. Isabella, I'd like to establish a trust for Victoria. I continue. There's no legal obligation, but there is a moral one. We're still family, at least half-sisters by blood. Victoria stares at me, suspicion warring with desperate hope on her face. William. Could you draft a modified agreement, I ask? I'll retain controlling interest in Clark Medical, but provisions should be made for both Victoria and Eleanor. Peterson nods. Professional demeanor returning. I can prepare the necessary paperwork. Eleanor's perfect posture finally breaks as she slumps slightly in her chair. Why would you do this? Isabella. After everything I gather, the DNA reports, slipping them back into my folder with an archivist's care. Because Richard Clark's final lesson wasn't about DNA or inheritance. It was about the difference between legal family and chosen family. I closed the portfolio. I'm choosing to be better than his example. A. Victoria wipes her tears with trembling fingers. I don't understand you. Bella. For the first time in my life, I see my sister clearly not as the golden child or the social media star. but as someone as damaged by Richard's manipulations as I was, you don't have to understand me, I reply. Just know that some connections go deeper than DNA or legal documents. Peterson begins outlining the terms of a new agreement. As Margaret quietly collects the hospital newsletters and photographs, evidence no longer needed. Now that truth has replaced suspicion, the weight of Richard's posthumous game lifts from my shoulders. In seeking to control us from beyond the grave, he instead gave me something unexpected, the freedom to define family on my own terms. A year after the revelation, I stand in what was once my father's office at Clark Medical Technologies. 1 month after the DNA revelation turned our family inside out, the mahogany desk, smaller than Peterson's but no less imposing now, there's my papers instead of Richard's. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston spreads before me, autumn painting the common in fiery reds and golds. Miss Clark, my assistant knocks softly. The board members are waiting in the conference room. A year ago, those same board members barely acknowledged my existence at foundation events. Now they seek my approval on quarterly projections. The irony isn't lost on me. Tell them 5 minutes. Please. I close the folder containing Victoria's latest email. Terse. But without the manipulative undertones I've learned to recognize. She left Boston 3 weeks after the revelation. Her Instagram suddenly silent, before resuming with carefully curated California sunsets. No family photos. No references to the Clark legacy. Just Victoria, reinventing herself dry. 0, 0, 0 miles from the truth. Eleanor sold the main house within 2 weeks. Moving to a Beacon Hill condo that could fit inside the original home's grand foyer. Our weekly lunches remain awkward affairs, filled with weather observations and halting attempts at deeper connection. Yesterday, she mentioned Antoine's name without flinching. Progress. Perhaps. Need help sorting those? Margaret asks from the doorway, gesturing toward the banker's box of personal items I've been avoiding. What would the archivist say if they knew I was procrastinating on proper documentation? I attempt to smile. Margaret pulls up a chair. They'd say personal archives are the hardest to catalog objectively. Together, we sift through the remnants of Richard's private life photographs and medical conference badges. Handwritten notes in margins of journal articles. Margaret pauses, holding up a folder labeled Family Records Confidential. Isabella. Look at this. Inside, medical records dating back 30 years. Genetic screening. Richard underwent long before Victoria or I knew anything about DNA testing. He knew. I whisper. He confirmed it decades ago, and still kept you both close. Margaret observes. That's something, isn't it? The realization settles over me. I spent years seeking validation from a man who knew the truth all along. The words taste bitter. Then, oddly freeing, he could have spared us all this drama. Or maybe this was his way of forcing the truth into the open. Margaret suggests, you're an archivist. You understand better than most how buried truths eventually surface. 6 months later, I stand before the Clark Medical Technologies executive team, presenting acquisition projections with a confidence that would have been impossible before. My father's awards, which once dominated this boardroom, now hang in the medical school lobby. Donated with Eleanor's blessing, I kept only one photo. Richard holding infant me. His expression unreadable, but his grip protective. The company has flourished under my leadership. Stock prices rising steadily. The board members who once spoke over me now lean forward when I speak. The transition wasn't seamless. 2 resigned in protest initially, but the remaining leadership recognized what Richard apparently saw. I am my father's daughter in all the ways that matter. My phone buzzes with a text from Victoria. Call when you have time. No rush. Our relationship exists now in occasional emails and brief phone calls. The pretense is gone, replaced by something cautious but genuine. Last month, she asked about our childhood summer vacations, wondering aloud if her memories had been rewritten to fit a narrative. Eleanor has been unexpectedly forthcoming during our monthly dinners. She speaks of Richard's emotional absence, of Antoine's kindness during a difficult period in her marriage. He noticed me when Richard only saw his work, she explained, twisting her napkin. It wasn't just physical. He valued my thoughts when your father couldn't hear them. I established the Laurent Medical Scholarship for French exchange students last quarter. A quiet acknowledgement of complicated truths, Victoria called after the press release, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Thank you, she said simply, for not erasing him. 2 years after Richard's death, I stand alone at his grave. Early morning mist wrapping around the granite headstone. The cemetery is silent, except for distant traffic and birdsong. I place white lilies against the stone, their perfume sweet in the autumn air. You thought this would destroy us, I say quietly, but it forced us to build something real instead. The Clark Family Foundation launches next week. Its mission, supporting children separated from biological parents. Eleanor will serve as honorary chairperson. Her idea. Surprisingly, Victoria contributed to the website design remotely. Neither relationship is healed completely, but the foundation gives us neutral ground to rebuild. Family is more than biology. I practice my opening lines for the foundation launch. It's truth. Even when painful, it's choosing connection when lies would be easier. A breeze stirs the cemetery trees, sending golden leaves spiraling down around me. I run my fingers over my father's engraved name, feeling neither the anger that consumed me in Peterson's office nor the vindication that followed the DNA revelation. Instead, I find something unexpected. Gratitude. You gave me an unexpected gift. Father, I whisper, freedom from pretense, and the chance to build authentic connections. Walking back to my car, I realized the most valuable inheritance wasn't controlling interest in the company or the financial security that came with it. Sometimes the most precious inheritance isn't what's in the will. It's the truth that sets you free.